Okay, we are live.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's great to be once again with you on a live discussion format, and we have a very well-known personality with us, Hariram Krishnan, probably one of the few people who made it from the level of a medical representative to the managing director's post and has been in that role for 12 years. And we at Medicine Man are very privileged to have him as our mentor, leading and guiding us. So thank you, Mr. Hariram, for being with us once again on this platform. Your session was very well received, and we have some very interesting questions for you.
Thank you, Anup. I think good evening to everybody. Thank you so much to Medicine Man and CredoWeb. I think this is one great platform which has come at a very, very, very opportune time, I would say. And, is certainly, in my opinion, the platform that's certainly going to help, the Indian pharma leaders and, the pharma industry as a whole to an extent, that it would help them, whether to nudge or, to push towards what is relevant and what is more important in the challenging context. And, thank you, to all the viewers who have been logging in, who have been encouraging with their comments, etc. And I'm sure, this will go on, for quite some time.
Yes.
Yes.
So let me get into the questions straight away, Mr. Hariram, because we have an hour's time. And here's the first question. The critical question now for pharma companies is how to stay ahead in the current challenging context. That is the COVID-19 context, the lockdown, the inability to meet doctors, the doctors not being able to see enough patients. Pharma has its own challenges. The AIOCD data has just come in showing overall degrowth for most segments and companies, as well as a prediction that this is going to be a zero growth year. So how do they stay ahead in the current challenging context?
That's a very, very pertinent question, Anup, for us to set the ball rolling. One thing, that gave me a great joy today evening when I saw on the WhatsApp about Cipla tying up, with this, what do we call this, Grey Active?
Go Active.
Go Active, I think, and I was just, a few days back, when I was doing some work and I was in one of the forums, I found, that there were two ways by which, the companies could really sort of get into the digital transformation. The one way, as we talk about, is a typical transformation where you start, from the beginning and then, you take it till the end, encompassing the whole organization. And it goes through a typical transformation cycle, and it definitely is a little longer. For example, I just read about Indian company RPG Group getting into total digital transformation, and it has touched all their departments, all their functions, and everybody. And this, I believe, has taken roughly about 3 to 4 years. This is what I was told. But I strongly believe that in the current context, waiting for such a transformation cycle is definitely going to be something that will put us into a back burner. The reason being that, the COVID is already in. We spoke about pre-COVID, currently COVID. We are now talking about post-COVID. Similarly, we spoke about normal, we spoke about new normal, and we have already started talking about next normal. That's what it is going. And nothing is going to be a straight line. So the question is how to shorten this cycle. First is, getting into the cycle. The second thing is to shorten the cycle. And I think, this news of Cipla tying up, with solution providers, I think, the tech solution providers, and utilizing them to a large extent as a ready-made platform, I think that's an excellent synergistic combination that I would say that's really going to help in terms of implementing the transformation much faster. And I believe in the current context, those who have those kind of resources, I think that's the way to go. And we have been also listening to Salil, our digital evangelist, where he keeps always talking about the fact that digital marketing is not about adding another tool to a marketing campaign, and it is something that is likely to transform and structure classic marketing activities by placing patient and the doctor instead of product at the core of marketing behavior. So this is the backdrop on which I would like to keep our whole discussions going. And one thing is very, very clear today, before we look at what we are talking in terms of to stay ahead, we need to understand that globally, the technology is growing exponentially, whereas organizations are growing logarithmically. And therefore, what is important for us to understand is, I go back to what Jack Welch said long time back. If the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, I think the end is a little dangerous. Therefore, it is important for us to try and how much we could catch up with that exponential change that is taking place. One thing I believe that is good is happening now is that there is a consensus that as healthcare continues to digitize, pharma companies must transform themselves in basic ways to stay competitive. I think this is something that has been very clearly getting established. Now, what will happen is the successful ones will rethink their business and operating models. This is what they have got to do. They have to transform their cultures and capabilities and adopt new long-term mindset. And I do remember your first webinar that you had, you emphasized a lot on mindset. I do very clearly remember. And I think, that's something, very, very important. And it is that mindset that should be able to foster innovation and take, bold strategic moves. That's what is going to be very, very important, when we come to talking about, staying ahead and, challenging this change, that is taking place. Now, these conclusions also, we must understand stem from three important themes that come out of many conversations that I have been listening to, many literatures that I have been reading. And the first important thing that I look at is, I think even a webinar that I attended yesterday emphasized quite a lot on this, that there have to be dramatic changes in the traditional roles. And the dynamics of healthcare stakeholders have fundamental implications for pharma companies. If I put it in a very, very simple way, how are we going to look at, so many layers of line managers, who are there? What is going to be the role in today's context, right? And what is going to be the span of control? Will the conventional rep or the field salesperson, will he be able to keep up the same metrics, that he was able to do earlier? Will his doctor calls depend on efficiency, or will it have to change, to effectiveness area? Now, this again, comes to the point, where we have been often discussing about, and I think this was the point of discussion I heard even yesterday, that it is time, we need to look at a basic thing like MR as a part of a healthcare professional, wherein we'll have to change, his traditional roles. Now, there are going to be attending challenges. We'll see about that later. And it is also very important that the time has come for us to reimagine pharma companies as solution companies and not asset companies. I still remember when I was managing director of Galdema, I had changed the language, in the Salesforce meetings, and people used to keep talking about, I sold, so many units, I sold, so many SKUs. I used to tell them that please replace this with dermatological solutions. And I found, that over a period of time, typically these words condition their mind to look at not just pushing, but looked at being able to reach so many number of patients through so many number of prescriptions. Such a simple thing I'm able to remember, which I did it, when I was in the seat under Helmut Affairs. And today I find that it has become the necessity that, the companies have to be solution providers and cannot be just talking about A product, B product, C product. Whether it is a disease approach solution, whether it is a therapy advocacy that we are talking about, or whether it is a patient advocacy. I think that's something, they will have to very consciously work, which also means that their behaviors, the communication that they make, their intentions, everything will have to change. Now, one thing is very clear today, the technology is ready. But pharma companies must change if they are going to enable and harness it more successfully. I think that's something, that is very important. Now, there are going to be three fundamental shifts that are required in this. So the one is, as I mentioned to you earlier, that fundamentally shift their mindsets, which are very, very important. They need to also transform themselves into a very, very agile organization. Because pharma is known to be conventional and considered to be one of those sectors that take a long time to bring a change management. And quite often, I look at it being a part of the sector that how often, do we get into that attitude of that frog sitting in the warm water and trying to jump, when it is about to be boiling, or, sometimes it is boiled and therefore, it is dead. So that's where you require that kind of an agility. And is leaving aside, the fear of failure and the attitude of what if. I think, they need to be experimentally minded as solution providers. Now, these teams emerging from research and interviews suggest very strongly that companies must make, therefore, three strategic shifts. First thing is go beyond the pack mentality. We have this. I've not used the word herd. I've used a more decent word, pack here. So we need to get out of that pack mentality by embracing experimentation and risk. There is a very strong, pack mentality that we have. And generally, organizations don't change unless they see everyone else change at the same time. So you rarely find, that there are people who are first-time movers, particularly in those domain areas that they are not conventionally used to. And the second important thing that I would look at is there has to be a collaborative approach. Irrespective of the fact, I see that, we have today some change that is taking place in terms of the Indian pharma sector, which includes also MNC. I still see one thing that they have to stay ahead of, health digitization. They should also recognize that they must contribute to the data. It cannot happen, that they hold, the data back. And it is something, that's going to help the industry as a whole. And how to take that relevant data out for each segment or for each organization, that's something, that could always be worked on. And the third, shift that I look at is reinventing companies by building non-traditional capabilities and embedding them in new operating models. And we just discussed about Cipla. It's an absolutely non-traditional model, that we are talking about, just now. So this is one example, classic example we have in front of us today, very hot on our plate. So overall, if you look at, I think it's very important that if the pharma companies want to keep up, or if they want to move ahead, must be bold and adopt an act now mentality, because they've got to do it now. They cannot say I'll do it after 2 years. It's got, according to me, it's got to be now. They must build innovative business models, and very, very important, they have to change, the organizational cultures. That's something, very, very important according to. So this would be my, that I would like to put across, what you have asked me very clear.
So what I'm hearing, to stay ahead, in this current challenging context, pharma companies need to adapt a growth mindset, a mindset that's very different from their earlier mindsets, so that they can move from pushing products to providing solutions and services which are very badly needed, because we see very, very many areas, whether in the doctor's practice or whether in relation to the doctor patient relationship, there are very many pain areas which pharma can provide solutions and services, and leading to better engagement and experience for the doctors. You also mentioned today's development itself of Cipla investing or taking a 22% stake in GoActive, which is a very, very significant signal for the industry. I think that there is something significant happening in the digital space, because earlier Cipla had invested last year in another digital company called Wealthy Therapeutics. But this may not be in the domain of all the pharma companies. And So, what are the major leadership challenges in driving digital transformation in the Indian pharma companies? What do leaders have to do, and what is the impact of that? Because you spoke of things like culture, which is really a leadership domain issue to change the culture of an organization. So, what are the major leadership challenges in driving digital transformation?
Yeah, that's probably the core purpose, that we have of this today's webinar, topic that we have. If you go back to the webinar, that I had quite some time back, in the same platform, I had put, very clearly a formula, of change. And there were four aspects, that I brought into this. The first thing is there should be a feeling that there is a need for change.
Right.
And this again, as we often, discussed, Anup, and I think you have emphasized, I have seen in two of your sessions, the mindset, right? And being able to look outside as to what is happening, and then bringing it to inside as to what is the need for me today, if I have to sustain, if I have to grow, and if I have to develop. Now, the reason why I am bringing this point is I do still see that there are many leaders, they still think that, with the easing of lockdown and the opening taking place, they are still of the opinion that things will gradually shift to normal. And this, according to me, a little worrying aspect, that I look at. And this is where I talk about that in today's context, we cannot be talking about smart goals, which is a little long term, which gets into the KPIs, right? They are all fine when we have a blue ocean, the blue sky scenario that we have. What is required and what is very important is that we need to have more of fast goals in these areas, because the way, that everyday things are happening, it seems to be much faster than any one of us can think about. And therefore, it is very important that when we look at using this word as fast goals, what I mean very clearly is something which calls for frequent discussions that have got to take place, right? People have to be brought back to the table. Yes, there has to be an ambitious goal that has got to be there, and it's got to be very specific. And very important is they've got to be very transparent. The second ingredient that I bring into the formula, that I spoke about is clear vision and goals. And that is where I brought in, that even fast goals can be very clear. It's got to be brought in very clearly. The capability to change. I think, one of the aspects that we have found, as much as companies have really built a lot of SOPs in terms of how they've got to roll out, working in various zones and things like that, etc., which are important. I'm not saying no from the safety point of view of people, but I'm still looking at how many companies have really thought in the same way in terms of building the capabilities of their people, in the last 3 months. So that's something, that I believe is very, very important. And they need to take that concrete first step. That's something, is what is going to help them in terms of bringing about this successful change. And each one of them is a challenge, by itself for them to work on. If any of these ingredients are going to miss, it's finally going to affect, the overall outcome, that's going to take place. Now, there are, some statistical data, that clearly emphasizes certain points which get connected to what I have said earlier. First important thing is, contrary to popular belief, digital transformation is less about technology and more about people. And therefore, it is very important for us to understand that we need to really, look at people. Technology is going to be available, and it is available today. So, 4 ingredients again that come into the picture here. We all know that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And therefore, sea changing company culture is going to be a major challenge, for the leaders. Very, very important. The second thing is thinking beyond the campaign mentality. The moment you give it to marketing people, and I believe, 59% will believe, that this is what it is. And therefore, stop confusing customer experience with the so-called hit and run campaigns, which you have all been witnessing for a long period of time. The third aspect that I look at is cross-department collaboration. In fact, this aspect of collaboration, you will find me emphasizing, right, time and again, as we discuss, today. And because one thing we must accept, the conventional culture, the conventional team alignment, the conventional hierarchical structure, all these have put in a situation where it is going to take the teams a long time and change, the team dynamics. Therefore, it's going to be a real leadership challenge. And I have personally witnessed this in one of the companies where I'm acting as a mentor, when they had to go through the whole digitization of the manufacturing plant. And I could see, how much of efforts it really took to work along. And it was all because of the mindset. And everybody liked to protect their own island and kingdom. So this is, therefore, it becomes, very, very important. And there are about 51% somewhat feel that lack of data, right, represents a challenge. So it is the question of how you improve. It all starts with improving the customer experiences and knowing more about the customer. And I think, it's available. It's the question of capturing it in a correct manner. If not, there is a need to find out. I think there are enough ways by which, it can be found. I think, these would be the 2 things, that I believe, that's going to really make a difference in terms of the leadership challenges.
So you have brought out very well that given the context of the situation and the need to change, that sense of urgency is one of the important ingredients that leaders require to be able to drive change. And this is the same sense of urgency which John Cotter, the person considered to be an authority on change management, talks about in his book. So then what would be the critical the competencies that leaders require in driving a digital transformation in pharma, because you said that pharma is generally slow to adapt to changes, and this situation requires agility. So they seem all a lot of contradictory over there. And then culture is something that is deep rooted and deep set, which takes time to evolve, much more to be able to change. So then I think it falls a lot on the leaders, and therefore what competencies are critical for leaders to be able to drive digital transformation within their organizations.
I think the first point, Anup, that really comes out, and I'm 100% sure that many people will, when we start talking about this, they say that you mean to say that don't we have the competencies? Why do you think we are in this place? And I think it's a very very apt question that you asked. But the point is, if they really sit down and reflect, like I make, one point to you that while, we have been talking on various platforms about, digital transformation, Digistorm, right? But somewhere along the line in the last couple of months, I felt that there is a need for me, if I have to be relevant and being on such platforms and grasping all that is happening currently, and being able to help in terms of identifying solutions. I must know more about what we are talking about beyond the word of digital. And I did not hesitate to go and sit with the classes that Mr. Salil Kalyanpur conducted 5 weeks, and I think we have all done that. Now the point is that the first question that I ask is, how many leaders would like to submit themselves to going through this rigor of trying to get the hang of what it is, even before they would like to sit down and bring about a change with their culture, with their team, and things like that. This is the first point that I would say. Therefore, what is important, even before I go to the word competency, is we need to have a relevant knowledge. That's the first point that I would bring. In terms of the competencies that I would look at, the most important thing is that they must be able to bring a productive work relationships. And here, I'm not just talking about the CEO, because anything to do with digital transformation will have a set of leaders from various functions, getting into the act, which will definitely be spearheaded, by the CEO or, the head of the organization. So these competencies that I am talking about are those that are applicable across the lines for all leaders who are going to be involved, in this change game that we are talking about. And therefore, their ability to build a very, very collaborative relationship. The word collaboration itself, if you split it, it is co-laboring. So therefore, it is very important that for productive work relationships, the collaboration becomes extremely important. Now, without getting into any order of priority, I'm just listing out. The other one is the strategic perspective. Being able to think through complex problems, trying to find solutions through better insights, having greater perspectives, bringing connectivity to the whole game, and also understanding the viewpoints of everybody who is involved in that game. So this is going to, in my opinion, call for a lot of listening capabilities and trying to understand where the other person is coming from. What is his level of knowledge? What is his level of apprehension? All these would be the aspects that will have to be considered. Taking initiative, you cannot be sitting in the back seat and expecting it to be a part of the transformation team. So one has to take initiatives in moving ahead. Participative management, very, very important. And more importantly is leading the team members. So the leadership quality has got to go a couple of notches above. It cannot be the typical old type that we talk about in terms of command and control, right? You got to you got to follow sometimes because their knowledge domain, may be much better. Their expertise, may be better. You may have to listen sometimes. You may have to question sometimes. You may have to coach sometimes. You have got to mentor sometimes. So one has to wear different hats, when you're leading your team members. And the other one is not being afraid of going through the change management, because it is an evolution, but in the current context, if it has to be fast, it has got to be a revolution. That's where the difference is going to come. And on certain areas where it is necessary, the ability to be very decisive becomes extremely important. And there should be a quick study of everything that has got to be done, and the ability to grasp very fast. I think these would be the top competencies that I would put. I would not rule out the other competencies that are required in terms of being composed, having a good composure, self-awareness. So I go to the emotional intelligence part that I am talking about. Having the respect, for the differences that could arise, when this is being, done. Obviously, one would also like to look at their own career management, which becomes, very relevant and important. Balance between personal and work life, because this is going to involve a certain amount of extra hours of work, extra time, etc. And naturally, when you're going through this process, you're bound to have some difficult people around you. So how do you handle them? I'm not using them as problem employees, but I'm certainly seeing that there are going to be some difficulties. So you got to see how to confront those difficulties very, very effectively. At the same time, you must have the capability to put people at ease. I think these would be, what I look at as typical competencies, that would really be required in the whole game, if I look at it.
So, quite a challenging task for those in leadership, given the menu of competencies, the new competencies that they require to have. And so, going forward, what do you see are the potential pitfalls or the derailers that lie ahead in this process of digital transformation?
I think there are, there are going to be derailers, but I think, if one is able to understand, it's being, forewarned is being forearmed. That's where the difference comes. And therefore, if we really look at the dominant, derailment characteristics, and, these have remained, constant. And this is, I'm talking in terms of people right now to you. So the typical aspect is, problem with interpersonal relationships. Now, I have seen this, irrespective of the fact, that how much ever, we may be seasoned, the other person invariably, could be a provoker. And this is something, where one has to be aware and know how to sort of navigate through, these situations. Otherwise, these would typically become derailers. And more so, if you're sitting in different parts of the geographical locations, it becomes all the more, challenging, I would say. Then the failure to meet, the business objectives. This could be a derailer unless organizational leadership is able to understand that they are willing to take some risks. And as we have always been talking, if you see that there is likely to be a failure, it's better to fail fast, get up, understand, learn, correct, change, and get things moving forward. I think, this is something, that one has got to recognize. And the biggest derailer is connected to what I have been, talking to earlier, that you don't build a proper team and you don't lead them very, very effectively. That's derailer that happens. And the other one is inability to change or adapt during a transition. You expect everybody else to change, but you don't change, right? And you are not willing to go through the pains of the transition, or the joys of the transition. Let's put it the other way around. And one of the important things that we say when we go through these transitions, just like the external environment currently has no certainty. In fact, I always feel very funny when there's news readers, when any expert comes, or when somebody comes, the first question they ask is, how long do you think this is going to go on? I think it's an absolute. I mean, the guy is going to really give you a guesstimate. It's going to be right. It's not going to be right. Who knows about it? And nobody has a crystal ball gazing approach here. Yes, there could be the epidemiologists and the other people who are involved with data, meta-analysis, everything. They would be able to talk in terms of certain trends, and they would therefore be able to put across these, and probably they will look at what are the ways by which we could shorten these cycles. This is what they would look at. The same thing has got to be looked at even from the point of view of an organizational leadership. The derailers have to be identified, but we should be able to adapt quickly to some of the changes, because there would be surprises as we go along. And I think one of the most important things that I look at out of this is having a very, very narrow functional orientation. Somebody says, I'm from marketing. I'm dealing with these set of brands, so that's not my area, sort of a thing. And let's take the finance guy is involved in this. He says, that's not my job. I'm not here to know what's happening in your market. I'm not interested in that. So this is another area which is a big derailer for many organizations, because the domain expertise itself becomes a sort of a conventional fence. And the fence, instead of being protective, it starts eating into the actual requirement. So they have to take care of this part of the requirement very, very clearly. The solutions that we really look at in terms of all this is the same that we have mentioned earlier. The more we are able to build collaborative relationships, I think that's going to make a huge difference. Having a good amount of strategic perspectives that are going to make a lot of difference. And as I mentioned to you earlier, it's also taking initiatives. Now, the reason why I am emphasizing is all these derailers fit into any of these solutions that we talk about. And participative management, and very importantly, is leading employees, and of course the ability to go through the change management. That's going to make a difference. So these would be what I look at. And apart from that, of course, we have other things where we need to look at, right? The ability to deal with digital natives, and digital Darwinism, digital the digital knaves. That's what we call about. So all these are things which are going to add to the whole game. I think we'll have to recognize all these factors. That's what I would put across.
So you also spoke about fear of failure as one of the possible, things that hold back people from trying out something new like digital. And so the ability or the mindset to experiment is very important. But what I find surprising is that, we have been talking in pharma that the pharma model is a broken one, which majority of the executives agree, and this is nowhere else reflected but in the difficulty that the pharma field force has got even before the COVID, in accessing doctors, in meeting doctors, such a large number of doctors, a large number of representatives trying to meet each doctor. We have seen that this 30-second, 30-minute, 3-minute calls are really parts of the broken model. And just today, I've been seeing posts on the social media of doctors telling me that you need to tell your pharma leaders to think outside the box. I mean, I'm told that the reps are waiting at the car parking areas. in the waiting areas, trying to meet the doctors, when the doctors are not really in a mindset to meet them. And at the same time, the we have taken, when we talk about digital, we have taken the same kind of a approach, like crowding the doctor's cabin. Now we are um, crowding the doctor with a series of webinars. um, so how do you look at this, and why is it that pharma is reluctant to try out new things, experimenting new things, fully well knowing that the existing model has not
Sorry,
only.
I think I got disconnected because
Yeah,
something
yeah.
went
So I was just
for a
telling
few
you
seconds.
that, yeah, just asking. We all know that the current model, to a large extent, if not failed, is a very very difficult to implement one. And doctors are telling me that the reps are still persisting with their old ways, trying to meet them. So, it's really difficult to understand that even at this time, pharma seems to be in some kind of a denial that the things have changed dramatically, not just from the COVID perspective, even for the doctors. Things have dramatically changed. They are no longer seeing patients as they used to see. There are so many barriers between them and the patients, but pharma is expecting those barriers to return back to normal, the removal of those barriers. So how do you, as someone who has been in the leadership, look at it, and what is your uh, you know kind of what do you have to say to the leaders in this kind of a time, with regard to the field force and the challenges that they have?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, and I think that's something that kept me awake and thinking. When the point came to me even last night. Uh, the first thing I look at, Anup, with this is uh, 3 months, according to me, is a fairly good amount of time, uh, and I'm still surprised, that we have given a room, for this to happen, and one of the leading physicians to look at this point out, and sort of it's more than empathizing. It was sympathy, with the field force, that I saw from the tone of the post, that came to us, and he is not wrong. The reason is, quite often I still see, when I either talk to some people, who are in the leadership positions at whatever level, there is a tendency, to sort of talk about business as usual. I mean, is it that what typically Salil mentioned? You said in the beginning of this webinar, uh, have we got so much, into this ostrich syndrome? Are we not aware of what is happening? So the first thing is, I think there has hardly been any alternatives that have been really thought of.
Okay.
That's the first point, that I would say. And here I would not, put everybody into the same basket. But nevertheless, I think this percentage is much larger than what I would have thought. Because when I was, interacting, with one of the leading, persons who is dealing with, with the digital transformation in one of the large MNCs, and since he has some understanding of what must be happening in this area as far as India is concerned, what I understood from him is that there are only 15%, of the companies, and most of them focused on what you talk in terms of specialty area, or what you talk in terms of chronic areas, where this digitalization has definitely moved forward, or the utilization of technology, right, to connect, in various ways, both in terms of marketing and selling, has moved forward. Now, where I feel the pain is, it is majority of these companies which have excellent manufacturing facilities. they have all really moved forward in terms of the various technological solutions and interventions. And today they have state of the art technology that is applied as an end-to-end solution in their manufacturing plants. And so also companies have gone in terms of their logistics area. There is definitely a lot of sea changes that have taken place. But in terms of marketing and sales that I'm talking about, I think it's still beyond the sales force effectiveness model. I think which is already a platform that is available, and which Mr. Deep Bhandari was also talking to us, right? Itself could be something which could have been used to integrate the other things that are required. And somewhere I still think marketing and sales is left behind. So the whole brunt is being borne by the field force people. And since the line managers are not able to accompany them in many places because of the requirement of social distancing and various other factors, what is also happening is that there is pressure that is coming on to these field guys, that you must do this, you must try, you must go and make an effort. How long can you have the fear, right? We must be courageous, and therefore let's go by business as usual. I think it's time they really look at the alternative models. And I think enough has been talked about what are the various ways by which it could be done. And I think people like Mr. Salil, everybody has been talking about it. And these 3 months, in my opinion, in terms of what we talked about capability building, we could have certainly reskilled or upskilled them at least to a level of about 40 to 50%. Even if we want to combine both physical and digital. If it is physical, let us look at, yes, you may get 1 or 2 calls, but we still do not know what is the effectiveness of those calls. Is it that the doctor calls and you just leave something behind and again get to the conventional doctor, just a few reminders? Or are there going to be really value adds that are going to be done? So we are, I think, we are backward in that area. We still need to think, quite a lot, according to me. And, as he said, can we become, more service oriented? Can we look at various ways? And this is where I said, when I said about, this pack mentality, I said is, one starts the webinar, everybody jumps into webinars. One starts giving PPEs, everybody starts, getting into giving PPEs, right? They're all required. I'm not saying no. They're very important. There's no two way about it. But the point is, beyond the point, that becomes, more a tactical approach, which I know is important, very relevant. But beyond that, we'll have to have the strategic intent. We'll have to move to we'll have to move into the strategic area. That's where, I still look at, it's definitely worrisome when I think about that.
Okay, it's been a good conversation. We have another 10 minutes left, so let's move to some, positives of this COVID-19, which is right from beginning with the FDA. There has been a sense of pragmatism among the regulators and the governments that there is a lot of bureaucratic red tapeism when it comes to drug approvals, or in the how soon a drug or molecule can come to the market. So what are the advantages? How can the pharma take advantage of this, pragmatism and kind of laxity, if I could say, from the regulators, to give a little bit of freedom to the pharma companies in either bringing new molecules or even repurposing older drugs like remdesivir, the quicker approval to try it out in this COVID crisis? What is the opportunity for pharma companies in this?
I think that's the current point which is being very hotly debated among the associations.
Okay.
So it's very, I think, very apt in the current context that you are asking this question. One good news that I must mention from whatever I have been hearing. For once, I have seen during this COVID times, the heads of all the three associations,
Right.
as Director General or Secretary General, whatever it is,
Right.
for the first time I see them, they are working together in all areas relating to the government,
Right.
which I would say is a very, very encouraging and positive sign, which I have not seen, when I have sat, in the committee, of MNC Association for a very long time. It's always been, even if, if they decided to go together, somewhere, there would be some kind of silos because each had their own, interest areas. So that's fine. But currently, this is very, very encouraging, I must say. And probably this kind of being in unison, representing many things or discussing, with the government officials and the bureaucrats, I think, has also made them, look at pharma sector differently now. And some of the areas where I have seen that they've been very open, I understand, from the feedback that I have is in terms of giving certain sanctions, pretty fast, which in the normal course would have taken a long period of time. Say, for example, one of the points that was talked about was, with regard to the technological part. Overall, I'm saying, from the healthcare point of view, the telemedicine, getting its thing in place, within 2 to 3 days, the moment, the COVID, crisis started. There have been other areas like in terms of, logistics requirement, etc., that have happened. Now, the similarly, I think even in terms of when you talk about bringing things to market faster or, working on things, I still believe that it is up to the pharma sector to put across things in a manner that is going to be more, solution oriented, than really putting in terms of just bringing, medication. And what is it going to do for the larger segment of the population currently that is struggling or likely to be potential strugglers? I think this is something, where the representation, I believe, will have to become stronger. And I think this is the right time that the government is certainly, more, open about looking at things. Now, coming back to the other areas that we are talking about in terms of, one of the burning questions, which I read in one of the articles recently also was about, the UCPMP. Right, the one which made some noise, went back to the cold storage, and there was something more I saw again in the month of February. But again, during the COVID days, I've not seen much happening. I fully, accept, the point, and I am of the opinion that it is time, that it is looked at. Otherwise, what will happen, right? All the work, that is done, like say even, if you have a very interesting webinar, something that is going to be a really value add. I'm just taking the basic part of the usage of technology. It should not happen, that it gets into a more push factor than a pull factor. And the pull should not become transactional. The pull should become, more, based on the content and the context and, the value adds, that are going to be brought in, which is going to largely benefit, healthcare as such, and therefore the patient's fraternity too. So I still think, that is one area probably, they could look at and take some, bold approaches, to push the agenda and include in that, what is currently required in terms of the digital intervention areas, etc., and make sure, that it is made more robust and something, that's going to be more futuristic too. And it should not be something that is solving the problem, but it is something, that is going to be more opportunity oriented area. This is what, I would look at, very, very clearly. So as of now, I don't see anything. Otherwise, I'm sure, we would have had a lot of news coming in, but I think it's in the limbo. But I would say, from my personal opinion, this would be the very ideal time, for the industry leaders to sit with the regulators and really work on this, and they really mean, what they said as far as the ethics are concerned.
So thank you very much, sir, for sharing your perspectives with such clarity. I'm sure that the leaders who have at various levels who are watching this have benefited from the discussions. And I want to tell our those who have registered, the senior leadership, that Medicine Man, along with CredoWeb, will be bringing such discussions and webinars every Friday and Wednesday at 5 p.m. So block these dates. Next, the coming Friday on the 10th of June, we have a very interesting session by Deep Bhandari as to how do we prepare, redefine, and cultivate sales managers during crisis. Some of the points that Mr. Hariram touched upon, that we had 3 months to upskill our people. And in the coming days, I think upskilling is going to be a constant effort. So Deep is going to touch on this aspect of how do you prepare, redefine, and cultivate sales managers during crisis, because many sales managers are unaware of what they need to do well to maximize during impact, during unprecedented certainty. So the key challenges for business leaders are: how do we assess sales managers' preparedness to lead in a crisis? How do we help sales managers to identify what they need to learn to support their teams effectively? And finally, how do they prepare to make a meaningful difference with their sales team? So we have a very interesting session lined up by Deep Bhandari uh, coming Friday, that is on the 10th of June. And do log in. All of you will get an email invitation. Just accept that email and join the discussions, and you'll be able to watch the webinar every Friday and live discussions every Wednesday. So thank you, sir, once again, and I thank all our participants, and I look forward to meeting you all again on the 10th Friday at 5 p.m. Good evening and have a great day.
Thank you, Anup. Thank you, viewers, and thanks everybody. I think when I come, in my subsequent webinar, I think my emphasis is going to be a lot on the organizational culture part as one of the important aspects of leadership challenges. So look forward to. Thank you, Anup. Thank you, Medicine Man. Thank you, CredoWeb, for this wonderful interactions. Great.
Thank you. Good night.